Hello and welcome back to another EDH deck tech idea. Today we are talking about Vraska, the Silencer. She's a 3 mana 3/3 with Death Touch, and whenever a non-token creature an opponent controls dies, you may pay 1 generic. If you do, return that card to the battlefield tapped and under your control. It's a treasure artifact with tap it, sacrifice this artifact, add 1 mana of any color, and it loses all other card types. First of all, we should clarify how this works. As soon as one of your opponent's creatures die, you get a trigger from Vraska which allows you to pay 1 generic. If you do, the creature card that just died will return back to the battlefield as a treasure token under your control. The important thing to notice here is that this treasure token will still have the abilities of that creature. For example, you Infernal Grasp one of your opponent's Solemn Simulacrums, you get to pay the 1 for Vraska's ability, you will get a tapped Solemn Simulacrum treasure token on your battlefield, which will trigger the Enter the Battlefield effect, and you get to search your library for a basic land card. And this is already the great thing about Vraska the Silencer. We don't really have to play a win con in this deck, we will just take our opponent's win cons. This is the reason why we have to make our opponents sacrifice their creatures. For example, with cards like Flashback Marauder, a 3 mana 3/1, and when it enters the battlefield, each player sacrifices a creature. Make sure to have enough mana available to pay for several Vraska triggers, but only pay for those of non-token creatures. Demon's Disciple, a 3 mana 3/1, and when it enters the battlefield, each player sacrifices a creature or planeswalker. A removal spell that should be played in every black deck in my opinion is Sheoldred's Edict, a 2 mana instant, choose 1. Each opponent sacrifices a non-token creature, each opponent sacrifices a creature token, or each opponent sacrifices a planeswalker. This unbelievable, versatile and cheap removal spell is really powerful, and as you have seen from all the cards that I have so far featured, we are always going for a 3-for-1 trade, which generates a lot of value for you. Vona's Hunger, a 3 mana instant with Ascent, and each opponent sacrifices a creature. If you have the City's Blessing, instead each opponent sacrifices half the creatures he or she controls, rounded up. Plaguecrafter, a 3 mana 3/2, and when it enters the battlefield, each player sacrifices a creature or planeswalker. Each player who can't discards a card. And if you wanna really target the really big threats of your opponents, you play Soul Shatter, a 3 mana instant. Each opponent sacrifices a creature or planeswalker with the highest converted mana cost among creatures and planeswalkers they control. Due to the fact that we are using a bunch of removal, we definitely need to draw cards. This is why we play Cheval, Bane of Monsters. A 2 mana 1/3 with Death Touch. At the beginning of your upkeep, if your opponents control no permanents with bounty counters on them, put a bounty counter on target creature or planeswalker an opponent controls. Whenever a permanent an opponent controls with a bounty counter on it dies, you gain 3 life and draw a card. A little bit expensive, but you will get there as Harvester of Souls, a 6 mana 5/5 with Death Touch, and whenever another non-token creature dies, you may draw a card. We also play Morbid Opportunist, a 3 mana 1/3, and whenever one or more other creatures die, draw a card. This ability triggers only once each turn. Of course, we don't only care about powerful ETB effects of our opponent's creatures, we also care about Leave the Battlefield triggers, which synergizes very well with cards like Deadly Dispute, a 2 mana instant. As an additional cost to cast a spell, sacrifice an artifact or creature, draw 2 cards and create a treasure token. This will easily allow us to sacrifice the creature that we have just stolen from our opponent, and maybe generate a little bit more value because of its Leave the Battlefield trigger. So we also play Costly Plunder, a little bit worse but still good in this deck. For 2 mana an instant, as an additional cost to cast a spell, sacrifice an artifact or creature to draw 2 cards. And then a little bit better, Fanatical Offering, a 2 mana instant. As an additional cost to cast a spell, sacrifice an artifact or creature, draw 2 cards and create a map token. While we are removing a lot of creatures from our opponent's boards, we also want to profit from that, so we play Agent of the Iron Throne, a 3 mana legendary enchantment background. In commander creatures you own have, whenever an artifact or creature you control is put into a graveyard from the battlefield, each opponent loses 1 life. Poison Tip Archer, a 4 mana 2/3 with Reach and Death Touch, and whenever another creature dies, each opponent loses 1 life. We play Blood Artist, a 2 mana 0/1, and when it or another creature dies, target player loses 1 life and you gain 1 life. His big brother is Falkenrath Noble, a 4 mana 2/2 with Flying, and when it or another creature dies, target player loses 1 life and you gain 1 life. Whenever we create the treasure token and also when we sacrifice the treasure token, Mirkwood Bats is a great synergy piece, a 4 mana 2/3 with Flying, and whenever you create or sacrifice a token, each opponent loses 1 life. We just gave our Blood Artist a few steroids, so we also play Vein Ripper, a 6 mana 6/5 with flying, ward, sacrifice a creature, and whenever a creature dies, target opponent loses 2 life and you gain 2 life. We are still looking for a win con in this deck, so we play powerful reanimation effects to get even more value from the creatures that we have just removed and sacrificed. So we play Reanimate, a 1 mana sorcery, put target creature card from a graveyard onto the battlefield under your control, you lose life equal to its mana value. Remember, this also counts for your opponent's graveyards. One of our win cons can be Rise of the Dark Realms, a 9 mana sorcery, put all creature cards from all graveyards onto the battlefield under your control. Once you have stolen a lot of your opponent's creatures and used that mana from the treasure tokens, you will have enough mana available to bring all of those creatures back with Rise of the Dark Realms. Another powerful Edict effect is Sheoldred, a 5 mana 4/5 with Menace, and when she enters the battlefield, each opponent sacrifices a non-token creature or planeswalker. In addition to that, she has an activated ability for 5 mana, exile Sheoldred, then return it to the battlefield transformed under its owner's control. Activate only as a sorcery and only if an opponent has 8 or more cards in their graveyard, and once we manage to flip her, she turns into the True Scriptures, an enchantment saga which on the first chapter for each opponent destroy up to 1 target creature or planeswalker that player controls. On the second chapter, each opponent discards 3 cards and then mills 3 cards. On the third chapter, she turns into a Rise of the Dark Realms because put all creature cards from all graveyards onto the battlefield under your control. Exile the True Scriptures, then return it to the battlefield. And this also means that you will get the front side of Sheoldred back. You want to win more? You get it. Marionette Master, a 6 mana 1/3 with Fabricate, so when this creature enters the battlefield, put 3 +1/+1 counters on it, or you create 3 1/1 colorless servo artifact creature tokens. Whenever an artifact you control is put into a graveyard from the battlefield, target opponent loses life equal to Marionette Master's power. I believe you immediately see where this is going. We will put additional counters on the Marionette Master, sacrifice the opponent's creatures which we just stole and turn into treasure tokens, to make them lose a bunch of life. Revel in Riches, a 5 mana enchantment, and whenever a creature an opponent controls dies, create a colorless treasure artifact token with tap, sacrifice this artifact, add 1 mana of any color to your mana pool. At the beginning of your upkeep, if you control 10 or more treasures, you win the game. Vraska and Revel in Riches can maybe win you the game within 1 turn cycle, if you are able to pull off a well-timed Edict effect, destroying a lot of your opponent's creatures, paying for Vraska's ability and also getting the trigger from Revel and Riches to make even more treasures and then winning your upkeep out of nowhere. Once you ran out of Edict effects, Viridin Longbow, a 1 mana artifact, is a great way to kill your opponent's creatures. Because equipped creature has tap, this creature deals 1 damage to any target and you can equip it for 3 mana. The equip cost is quite high, but it turns Vraska into a killing machine because she has Death Touch, and as soon as she deals 1 damage to any target, which will most likely be your opponent's powerful creatures, they will die due to Death Touch, and then you can bring them back on your side of the battlefield. The last card that I want to feature is Panharmonicon, a 4 mana artifact, and if an artifact or creature entering the battlefield causes the triggered ability of a permanent you control to trigger, that ability triggers an additional time. Remember that the creatures that we steal with Vraska are artifact treasure tokens, so if they have an enter the battlefield effect, we will get this ability twice. Alright guys, these were a few cards that I would feature on Vraska the Silencer. Let me know down in the comments below which cards you would add to the deck, which legendary creature I shall feature next, and then I would say see you in the next one. Goodbye guys.